Today, we're diving into a story that's causing some serious waves. A formal request has landed at the Supreme Court asking them to rethink the nationwide right to same-sex marriage. So let's get right into what's going on. Right out of the gate, this is the core of it. We're not talking about a political debate or some abstract idea. A real, actual petition is now before the Supreme Court, and its goal is explicit: to overturn the very ruling that made same-sex marriage a constitutional right. So to really get what's on the line here, we have to rewind a bit and look at the landmark ruling that's right in the crosshairs of this new challenge. It all comes back to Obergefell v. Hodges. You'll remember, back in 2015, this was the big one. This decision made same-sex marriage legal across all 50 states. It was a foundational shift, saying the Constitution guarantees this right. And it's that very precedent that's now being directly targeted. So who exactly is bringing this fight to the Supreme Court? Well, this story is centered around a person whose name became pretty famous right after that 2015 decision was made. The person at the heart of this petition is Kim Davis. If that name rings a bell, it's because she was the county clerk in Kentucky who, right after the Obergefell ruling came down, made headlines for refusing to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples, saying it was against her religious beliefs. And that whole situation escalated fast. I mean, the Supreme Court makes its decision in June, and by July, she's refusing licenses. That led to a huge legal showdown that ended with her actually being jailed for 6 days for defying a court order. It was a major national story. So you might be asking, how does that mess from 2015 lead to a Supreme Court challenge today? Well, the answer really boils down to money. Davis ended up losing a defamation lawsuit and was ordered to pay more than $360,000. And it's her appeal of that financial penalty that's the legal vehicle for this petition, asking the court to not just look at her case, but to throw out Obergefell entirely. But you know, a case like this never happens in a bubble. We have to look at the bigger picture, at the intense climate that's swirling around the court right now. The specific wording in this petition is really, really important. It calls the Obergefell decision egregiously wrong. Now, that phrase isn't an accident. That is the exact legal language that was used successfully to argue for overturning Roe v. Wade. So it's a legal strategy that has a proven track record. And this line of thinking, it's already been voiced from inside the court. After the decision on abortion rights, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote a separate opinion where he specifically named Obergefell as a past ruling that he believes the court has a duty to correct. So we know there's at least some appetite on the bench to revisit this. So what you have is this real tension. On one side, you have a lot of legal experts saying, it's pretty unlikely the court will actually agree to hear this. But on the other side, the political pressure is enormous. Really influential groups like the Southern Baptist Convention have publicly stated that getting Obergefell overturned is one of their absolute top priorities. So with all that going on, what are the actual concrete next steps? Let's kind of pull back the curtain on how the court works and look at the timeline. All right, here's how it could play out. At the end of September, the justices will get together in private and decide whether to take up this petition. Then, sometime in October, we'll get the news, a yes or a no. If it's a yes, then we'd probably see oral arguments in early 2026, with a final ruling landing by the summer. Now, here's a really important reality check. The Supreme Court gets thousands and thousands of petitions every single year. They only agree to hear a tiny, tiny fraction of them. We're talking usually less than 100. So just because a petition is filed, it's a long shot from being a guarantee that it'll get a full hearing. But what if it is one of those long shots? What if they do hear the case? And what if they do overturn Obergefell? Let's game that out, because what that would actually mean for the country is complicated. And this right here is the absolute key to understanding the what-if scenario. Back in 2022, Congress passed the Respect for Marriage Act. You can think of it as a legal backstop. It doesn't force any state to issue a same-sex marriage license, but, and this is crucial, it does force every state to legally recognize a same-sex marriage, as long as it was performed legally somewhere else. So this is probably the most important distinction to make. If Obergefell gets overturned, the big change is that some states could simply stop issuing new marriage licenses to same-sex couples. But because of that 2022 law, what's protected is the recognition. States would still be required by federal law to recognize a legal marriage from another state.
So what's the bottom line here? The big takeaway is that overturning Obergefell wouldn't just turn the clock back to 2014. It would create this messy patchwork of state laws, where a couple might have to travel out of state to get married. But, and this is a big but, thanks to the Respect for Marriage Act, it would not automatically cancel existing marriages or make them legally invisible across the country.
And all of this, it leaves us with a much bigger, more fundamental question. When these huge landmark rulings, precedents that have shaped American life for years, can be challenged so directly, what does the idea of settled law even mean anymore? That's the real question to chew on as we wait to see what happens next. Thanks for joining The Explainer.